I'm WC Gentry. I'm a time traveler from 2020 trying to get back to see George Washington, the father of our country, to ask him his advice in this time of crisis. Mr. President Washington.
Who are you, sir?
I'm sorry to startle you, sir, but I desperately need to speak to you.
Well, I've never seen anyone dressed as such. Where are you from, sir?
Sir, I'm from Jacksonville, Florida in the year 2020. I've come from the future because we need your help.
Well, I have never heard of anyone coming from the future. How does one do that?
Well, I was teleported. You know, it's kind of a Star Trek sort of thing, if you know what I mean.
Star Trek?
No, well, sorry, it's too confusing, but trust me, I am from the future. I need to talk to you. I'm dressed this way because we're in the midst of a huge crisis involving a virus.
Well, Florida is not a state. Are you an American?
I am an American, and Florida is a state now. And I can take these masks and gloves off if we can just sit down and have a socially appropriate distance from one another and talk.
Well, if you're an American,
yes, sir,
I'll do my best to help you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Please sit here in my garden next to the Potomac River, and I'll see if I can answer your questions.
Thank you. I'm going to move the chair a little bit further away from you so we can both be safe. I don't want to give you the virus.
The what?
The virus. It's like a bacteria. Never mind. It's okay if I sit over here.
Are you sick?
I'm not sick. I was tested before I came.
We've had plagues before, like the pox.
Yes, and this plague would devastate America, and so I will keep my distance, and I am safe to talk to you, sir.
Very well. Please be seated. And your name again, sir?
My name is W.C. Gentry.
Mr. Gentry.
Mr. Gentry, yes, sir.
Please have a seat,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Gentry. It's I'll consider you my guest here at Mount Vernon.
Thank you very much, sir. I can't tell you what an incredible honor this is to be with you. If I may, let me take this garb off. What can we do, or what as citizens, to try to help our politicians do a better job of working together and making sure that they're doing their job and representing the people?
You mentioned partisanship. Is that part of your problem in Jacksonville?
Yeah, it's really more of a problem in Washington, D.C. than anywhere else. But yeah, it's partisanship. Two parties that can't agree on anything.
Well, again, it's something that I warned about in my farewell address. There are dangers associated with political parties. Yes, it's natural for people to want to gather together and organize according to their beliefs, but there are risks associated with that partisanship, which it sounds like you're suffering from today.
Yes, we are. And how can, as a citizen, what can we do when we disagree with what is happening in Washington?
Well, Mr. Gentry, I'm thinking about what you said. What can the people do? Well, they must always approach their problems in a principled and moral way, but they must be willing to compromise. Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Jefferson disagree vehemently about many things from opposite sides of the political spectrum, but they have found ways to compromise and produce our Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, our very charter for individual liberty. Also, I would say that citizens need to realize that the responsibilities for the health, safety, and welfare of themselves and of our nation don't reside exclusively in the government and in our leaders. The people themselves have a duty to one another. Just as soldiers in the Continental Army felt a duty to protect and defend their fellow soldiers, their soldier to their right and the soldier to their left, such as in the boats that we crossed the Delaware on, the Delaware River, to fight the great battle at Trenton. So too should citizens look to their neighbors to their right and their neighbors to their left and do what they can to protect them from the dangers of a pestilence, such as a disease, from war, and from economic hardship, such as damage to the economy and the loss of their jobs. So individual citizens must be self-reliant as much as they look to their government for leadership and protection.
Now, Mr. President, you mentioned the Constitution, and I know that you're eminently familiar with it. You were the president of the Constitutional Convention after
Yes.
leading us through the Revolutionary War. And again, I can't tell you what an incredible honor this is to be with you, sir. One of the problems that we are starting to have, or may have, is how do we reconcile our constitutional rights with the needs of the government to protect us from this virus? I mean, the Declaration of Independence says government is established to protect our inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But we're not real happy right now, I can tell you that, with this coronavirus thing. And I mean, our kids, for example, can't even go to school. They're having to learn online.
You use the word online. What does that mean?
Yes, you know, the internet. The kids have to learn online using the internet.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gentry, you lost me again. I don't know what internet means.
I'm sorry, sir. It's not really the point. It's the point that people are having to really drastically change their lives.
It sounds like your fellow citizens are being inconvenienced by this pestilence, but that will require sacrifice. Thomas Jefferson spoke of the importance of governance by common sense, and that meant that the people needed to bring their common sense to solving problems that affect us all. So maybe a little common sense would help your friends and neighbors in Jacksonville.
Well, beyond having to be at home and having to go online for our kids' education, there are other things. In some countries, they're even tracking cell phones to track people to see where they're going.
What?
It's a device. Everyone has one, and in a couple hundred years, you would have one too. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is that we're having some significant limitations on our rights. We can't even hang out together, and that's a violation of the right to
You mean by
assemble.
hang out, come together to be together?
Hang out, I mean like go to a movie together.
A what?
A movie, it's like a play, except it's on film. What I'm trying
I know what a play is.
Okay, well, it's sort of like that. The First Amendment guarantees not only the right of speech and of press, it guarantees the right of assembly, and people aren't being allowed to assemble the way they want to.
Well, there are good reasons for people not to come together and be too close when a pestilence is affecting towns and farming communities. When we had the smallpox, it seemed that people were healthier when they weren't as close together. And so maybe for a short period of time, it would be good for people not to assemble as much as possible. Very few rights in the Bill of Rights are so absolute that they cannot be modified, temporarily at least, in order to achieve the greater good for the greatest number of people, which in the case of a pestilence involves, as we've said, their health, their safety, and their economic welfare.
Well, let me ask you this, because under the Sixth Amendment for criminal cases and the Seventh Amendment for civil cases, there's a right to trial by jury. And we have a constitutional right to trial by jury and a right to confront our witnesses and the people who are speaking against us. And under the Sixth Amendment, we have a right to an attorney. Well, those things involve face-to-face contact.
Well,
Are you saying that we should give up our right to trial by jury and let judges or the state start deciding those cases?
Mr. Gentry, I am very familiar with the importance of the people's right to be confronted by their accusers and for their criminal and civil disputes to be decided by their peers, that is, by juries of their peers. One of the most important rights that we have as Americans, and I'm so glad to hear that you are familiar and with the right to jury trial, and that it still exists in America, because a despot, a tyrant, would make one of his first priorities the elimination or the restriction of the right to trial by jury. But suspending or postponing, shall we say, jury trials in order to help the people avoid contracting a disease like smallpox or like this coronavirus you speak of, that may be a justification. That may be justified for a short period of time. But certainly, every patriot would oppose the elimination of jury trials for any reason.
Mr. President, I forgot to ask you. I know you.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Gentry. My step-grandchildren, Washi and Nellie. Hello, children. Have you finished your chores?
Yes, sir. We thought you might like some lemonade.
Well, so thoughtful of you and so gracious. My guest, Mr. Gentry, is from another time. Well, never mind. Your grandmother wouldn't understand it either. What do you have there?
Lemonade. Lemonade for you.
Oh, my favorite. Mr. Gentry, do you like lemonade?
I do, but I'm kind of rushed here, Mr. President. If we could get back to our conversation.
Well, let's talk while the children serve us some lemonade. Washi, thank you.
So I've never seen anyone live close like this.
Well, I'm from a long way away. It's called Jacksonville, Florida. 200 years from now.
Wow. Nellie, thank you, dear.
You're welcome.
Go tell your grandmother that all is well, that Mr. Gentry, our visitor and guest, is a gentleman.
Do you like our costume?
Yes, very well. I do. You've dressed like founding fathers today. Something to be proud of. Thank you, children.
Thank you so much. Mr. President, you are so fortunate to have such beautiful grandchildren.
Thank you, and they're well educated too. It's so important.
I can see that. And would you, if you had a message to send to the young people of America today, what would it be?
That they are fundamental and vital to the health of our country, and always will be. You know, the preamble to the Constitution begins with 3 wonderful words which lie at the very heart of our country. We the people. Doesn't say we the grown-ups. It includes all people, including young people, and especially young people, because they are the future of our country at any time in its history. Now, in order for young people to be good citizens, they need to be well informed. They need to be educated in civics, and they need to care about personal freedoms and liberty, because these liberties were not handed to us. They were won through a long and bloody conflict, great sacrifice of life and personal freedom and wealth was all contributed to win our independence from Great Britain, and the chance to fulfill our dreams and to carry out this great experiment that we call America. This experiment that more than anything is dedicated to the future happiness of our young people. The young people that I know are dedicated to the mission of preserving their individual liberties, not only for themselves as they grow into adulthood, but for their children as well, and their children's children. So, what kind of education is necessary for young people to be effective leaders? It must be informed and passionate and involved leadership. You know, Thomas Jefferson said that government in America is not by the majority. It's by the majority of those who participate in government. And so all young people should be encouraged to participate in their government. Not to be silent, but to speak their minds about what's important to them and to their neighbors, to preserve our liberties for all time.
Well, Mr. President, you mentioned the importance of the involvement in our democratic process by young people. But yet they still can't vote if they haven't attained the age of
But there are
voting.
many things they can do even before they turn 18 and can cast votes. For example, they can speak out on issues of importance that they care about. And we have seen young people influence changes in the law. Many of the soldiers in the Revolutionary War were under 16 years old.
Well, sir, for example, one of the big controversies in our country today is around the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms.
Yes.
Are you familiar with the Second Amendment?
Well,
and why did you guys pass the Second Amendment?
Well, it's such an interesting question. There was a fierce debate about it, but let me read to you what the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution actually says, Mr. Gentry. Amendment 2, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Well, we don't have militia anymore in 2020.
Really? Well, a militia was important to us during the time of the Revolution. It was the citizens' army made up of farmers and craftsmen and shopkeepers, and we felt that it was important to enable a militia man to have a rifle, to have a knife.
So, but in this day and time, we have a standing army that has lots of weapons. And the question we have in 2020 is, does this amendment give the right to every citizen, for example, to have an assault rifle?
A what?
It's an assault rifle. It's a gun that maybe shoot 20 or 30 bullets as fast as you can pull the trigger.
Never heard of such a thing. Impossible.
Well, sir, it is very possible in our day and age, and it's a very controversial issue with people having strong feelings on both sides.
Well, what would be the purpose of such a weapon?
I don't have a clue, sir, but what should people do who have opinions?
Well, if young people have strong feelings about whether these so-called assault weapons are good or bad for society, they should speak out. Even though they cannot vote, they can have a great influence on their elders and on each other and on lawmakers about what is wise and what is not wise, and what the Second Amendment means and what it doesn't mean. And I would encourage the young people in Jacksonville, where you're from,
yes, sir,
to do just that, Mr. Gentry.
Sir, I have really got to go. My beeper's going off. I'm not sure what happens if I don't get back to the portal really quickly here. And
the last time I met a man who was in as big a hurry as you, Mr. Gentry, it turned out he was a lawyer. You wouldn't happen to be a lawyer, would you?
I am, sir. I am a lawyer.
I'm not surprised. And you've shown great familiarity with the issues of good governance in our democracy.
Thank you, sir. Now, but I've got to suit back up, get my mask and gloves on, and head back to 2020. Gotta go, sir.